Hello everyone and welcome back to Wiki Reading. Today I will be reading about Bastet. Bastet or Bast, also known as Ubasti or Bubastis, is a goddess of ancient Egyptian religion, possibly of Nubian origin, worshipped as early as the 2nd dynasty, 2890 BCE. In ancient Greek religion she was known as Ailuros. Bastet was worshipped in Bubastis in Lower Egypt, originally as a lioness goddess, a role shared by other deities such as Sekhmet. Eventually, Bastet and Sekhmet were characterized as two aspects of the same goddess, with Sekhmet representing the powerful warrior and protector aspect, and Bastet, who increasingly was depicted as a cat, representing a gentler aspect. Bastet, which is the form of the name that is most commonly adopted by Egyptologists today because of its use in later dynasties, is a modern convention offering one possible reconstruction. In early Egyptian hieroglyphs, her name appears to have been Bastet. James Peter Allen vocalizes the original form of the name as Buastit or Buastiat, with a representing a glottal stop. In Middle Egyptian writing, the second T marks a feminine ending, but usually was not pronounced, and the aleph may have been moved to a position before the accented syllable Bast. By the first millennium, then, Bastet would have been something like Ubasti, Ubastat in Egyptian speech, later becoming Coptic Ubaste. The name is rendered in Phoenician as Ubaste, romanicized as Bast. What the name of the goddess means remains uncertain. Names of ancient Egyptian deities often were represented as references to associations or with euphemisms, being cult secrets. One recent suggestion by Stephen Quirk, Ancient Egyptian Religion, explains Bastet as meaning she of the ointment jar. This ties in with the observation that her name was written with the hieroglyph for ointment jar, Bast, and that she was associated with protective ointments, among other things. The name of the material known as alabaster might, through Greek, come from the name of the goddess. This association would have come about much later than when the goddess was a protective lioness goddess, however, and is only useful in deciphering the origin of the term alabaster. James P. Allen instead derives the name as a Nisba construction from a place name, Bastet, Bast, with the meaning she of Bast. Bastet was originally a fierce lioness warrior goddess of the sun, worshipped throughout most of ancient Egyptian history. Later she became the cat goddess that is familiar today. She was then depicted as the daughter of Ra and Isis with the consort of Ta, with whom she had a son, Maiz. As protector of Lower Egypt, she was seen as defender of the king and consequently of the sun god Ra. Along with other deities such as Hathor, Sekhmet, and Isis, Bastet was associated with the Eye of Ra. She has been depicted as fighting the evil snake named Apep, an enemy of Ra. In addition to her solar connection, she was also related to Wajet, one of the oldest Egyptian goddesses from the southern delta who was dubbed Eye of the Moon. Bastet was also a goddess of pregnancy and childbirth, possibly because of the fertility of the domestic cat. Images of Bastet were often created from alabaster. The goddess was sometimes depicted holding a ceremonial sistrum in one hand and an aegis in the other, the aegis usually resembling a collar or gorget, embellished with a lioness head. Bastet was also depicted as the goddess of protection against contagious diseases and evil spirits. Her name was originally shorter, transliterated as Bast in English. Bast first appears in the 3rd millennium BCE, where she is depicted as either a fierce lioness or a woman with the head of a lioness. 2,000 years later, during the 3rd intermediate period of Egypt, circa 1070 to 712 BCE, Bast began to be depicted as a domestic cat or a cat-headed woman. Scribes of the New Kingdom in later eras began referring to her with an additional feminine suffix as Bastet. The name change is thought to have been added to emphasize the pronunciation of the ending T sound, often left silent. Cats in ancient Egypt were highly revered, partially due to their ability to combat vermin such as mice and rats, which threatened key food supplies, as well as snakes, especially cobras. Cats of royalty were, in some instances, known to be dressed in golden jewelry and allowed to eat from the same plate as other members of the household. Dennis C. Turner and Patrick Bateson estimate that during the 22nd dynasty, circa 945 to 715 BCE, Bastet changed from being a lioness deity into being predominantly a major cat deity. The native Egyptian rulers were replaced by Greeks during an occupation of ancient Egypt in the Ptolemaic dynasty that lasted almost 300 years. The Greeks sometimes equated Bastet with one of their goddesses, Artemis. Bastet was depicted by Egyptians with the head of a cat and the slender body of a woman. Sometimes Bastet was venerated as just a cat head. Because domestic cats tend to be tender and protective of their offspring, Bastet was also regarded as a good mother and sometimes was depicted with numerous kittens. Bastet was a local deity whose religious sect was centered in the city of the Nile Delta, later named Bubastis. It lay near what is known today as Zagazig. The town known in Egypt as Per Bastet carries her name, literally meaning House of Bastet. It was known in Greek as Bubastis and translated into Hebrew as P-Baset, spelled with the initial T sound of the last syllable. In the biblical book of Ezekiel 30:17, the town appears in the Hebrew form P-Baseth. Herodotus, an ancient Greek historian who traveled in Egypt in the 5th century BCE, describes Bastet's temple at some length. Save for the entrance, it stands on an island. 2 separate channels approach it from the Nile, and after coming up to the entry of the temple, they run around it on opposite sides, each of them 100 feet wide and overshadowed by trees. The temple is in the midst of the city, the whole circuit of which commands a view down into it, for the city's level has been raised. But that of the temple has been left as it was from the first, so that it can be seen into from without. A stone wall, carven with figures, runs around it. Within is a grove of very tall trees, growing round a great shrine, wherein is the image of the goddess. The temple is a square, each side measuring a furlong. A road, paved with stone, of about 3 furlongs length, leads to the entrance, running eastward through the marketplace, towards the temple of Hermes. This road is about 400 feet wide, and bordered by trees reaching to heaven. This description by Herodotus and several Egyptian texts suggests that water surrounded the temple on 3 out of 4 sides, forming a type of lake known as Isheru, not too dissimilar from that surrounding the temple of the mother goddess Mut in Karnak at Thebes. These lakes were typical components of temples devoted to a number of lioness goddesses, Bastet, Mut, Tefnut, Hathor, Sekhmet, who were said to represent one original goddess and who came to be associated with sun gods such as Horus and Ra, as well as the Eye of Ra. Each of these goddesses had to be appeased by a specific set of rituals. One myth relates that a lioness, fiery and wrathful, was cooled down by the water of the lake and thus was transformed into a gentle cat, settling down in the temple. At the Bubastis temple, large numbers of cats were found to have been mummified and buried, many next to their owners. More than 300,000 mummified cats were discovered when Bastet's temple was excavated. Turner and Bateson suggest that the status of the cat in Egypt was roughly equivalent to that of the cow in modern India. The death of a cat might leave a family in great mourning, and those who could afford the expense would have the cat embalmed or buried in pet cemeteries, which demonstrates the great prevalence of the cult of Bastet. Extensive burials of cat remains have been found not only at Bubastis, but also at Saqqara, including the temple complex known as the Bubastium. In 1888, a farmer uncovered a burial site of many hundreds of thousands of cats in Beni Hassan. Herodotus relates that many of the solemn festivals held in Egypt, the most important and most popular one, was that celebrated in Bubastis in honor of this goddess. Each year on the day of her festival, the town was said to have attracted some 700,000 visitors, both men and women, but not children, who arrived in numerous crowded ships. The women engaged in music, song, and dance on their way to the place. Great sacrifices were made, and prodigious amounts of wine were drunk, more than was the case throughout the year. This accords well with Egyptian sources, which prescribe that lioness goddesses are to be appeased with the feasts of drunkenness. A festival of Bastet was known to be celebrated during the New Kingdom of Bubastis. The block statue from the 18th dynasty, circa 1380 BCE, of Neferka, the Wab priest of Sekhmet, provides written evidence for this. The inscription suggests that the king, Amenhotep III, was present at the event and had great offerings made to the deity.